So I started off this session with Ripley, just trying to pick up her feet. I start at the front and then go to the back. I'm not too concerned that she moved over. You can see at this stage I'm really just grabbing the feathers and pulling, and as soon as she lifts it I put her foot right back down and I walk around the front of her to go to the other side and do the same thing. Don't quite trust her at this point to go behind her. And she's pretty good about her feet, getting better. And now I'm just using the whip to desensitize her to touch on all the parts of her bodies, with me being able to stay a little bit further away so there's a little less risk. And her sensitive spots tend to be right in her girth area and on her hind legs. So the whip helps bridge the gap a little bit and limit the risk of me being kicked in the head. And here, I'm just reaching over her and flapping my hand, which used to bother her quite a bit more than it did right there. And now I'm asking her to yield her haunches, which is honestly something that I'm not the best at. Ripley's not terrible at it. I get a little stuck in my body positioning though. You can see here at this stage, she also, while she's yielding her haunches, she goes to take a little step forward, and I would like her front feet to stay in one place. It's not too big a deal of where she is in her training right now, but ideally, she would keep her front feet in the same spot. And here you can see we're definitely inching down the round pen. So I keep trying and asking, but honestly I should really reposition her, because there's not, the round pen you can't see, it's right there though, and there's not really a place for her haunches to go. So after that I gave her a break for a second, and now I'm redirecting her. And again, here I'm asking her to yield her haunches. And you can see my body is in the wrong spot. I have to jump forward to catch her shoulders from moving forward every time I ask her to yield her haunches, because she thinks that I'm actually asking her to move forward. So I could be a little bit clearer to help her. But she does give me a step, so I give her a pat. And again, she's trying, and she gave me a little step there. And she's looking at me, so I give her another pat. And now we're going to change directions, which she's gotten the hang of pretty good. And again, you can see we're a little bit lacking in forward motion here. My body language is just a bit more passive than I'd like it to be for asking her to go forward. But I look at her haunches, ask her to move them, and for the stop, and she does that very beautifully. So we give her a pat. And again, I try to get her to take just one more step over, and I have to keep inching forward to keep her shoulders still. And she's quite good for giving me just that little step. There you go, Ripley. And then I give her a break for a minute. So I just cut out about a minute of me standing and watching Ripley, because that's fairly boring. So this is more of the same. Most of the session was spent on working with her to yield her haunches. And she gives me a good step there, so I give her a pat. And then we have two very decent steps. And then I think I want her to just take one more. You can see she's not super focused on me. And there, that was a good step with some good crossover. So then I'll go to work on it from the other side. And that was a very good one for her. That's more steps than I had gotten before. So I was quite pleased with that. I should have stopped, honestly, a little bit sooner before asking for this last step and given her a pat while she had done a really good job. But we all get a little bit greedy when we're training and we want just one more, and sometimes it's better to just take a break. So I think she was getting a little bit bored and tired of yielding her haunches, so we go back to practicing picking up our feet. Definitely a little stickier with the hind feet, but she's still good for picking it up. And again, we'll go back and we'll do everything on both sides, make sure we're even. We've got the front foot. And again, hind feet are a little bit sticky. So I lean into her and I keep pulling on the feathers, and we'll try that one more time. We get it just a little bit off the ground, and there we go. But this is very good progress for her because she, at the start, was quite sensitive to her hind legs being touched. And now we'll start working on yielding the shoulders, which is another required movement for the tip challenges. And again, the body positioning is not something that I'm necessarily the best at, as I'm still a little bit new, but you can see the difference between asking her to yield her haunches and her shoulders. So the shoulders, I stay way more in front of her, and I direct the whip in my hand more at her neck and shoulders as opposed to her haunches. And she's a pretty clever little mare, and she picks it up like very quickly. And the goal is for the haunches to stay more or less in one place and for the front feet to cross over. There we go. We get a nice crossover there. The crossing over of the front feet is something that's a little bit difficult for Ripley sometimes. She gets the gist to move her shoulders, but we don't always cross our front feet. It's important to sprinkle in some breaks to give your horse a chance to process. I personally love mares, and I think it's a little funny how our expressions were more or less the same right there. So now I'm asking her to move her shoulders, and we get a really good step right there. And then she goes a little bit further away from me than I wanted. So I spent another couple of minutes asking her to yield her haunches and her shoulders, and then I decided that she had had a little bit of enough of that. So we go back to just touching her with the whip and getting used to being touched all over her body. And you see she doesn't care too much about her shoulders because we spent quite a bit of time there. And she moves her shoulders. And again, I'm not quite in the right spot for asking her to move forward. So I go and I give her a second to be by herself for a minute. And the shot is lovely because you can see how uneven I cut her mane. So a little bit of some chewing there. And Ripley is honestly a little more concerned about what's happening in the pen next to her. So I gave Ripley a couple minutes, and now we're moving on to try something else. So I'm trying right now to get her to do a side pass. So you can see my body positioning is more towards the middle of her barrel, and we're combining yielding the shoulders and the haunches. So this, I think, was my first attempt at doing it. And you can see she's a little confused. She gave a good effort, though. So the easier way to start doing this, instead of just putting her in the middle of the pen, is putting her perpendicular to the pen to help her figure out that I want her to move sideways and not forward. When you put their heads facing the pen, they grasp the idea of moving sideways a little bit quicker because you don't have to stop the forward motion. The pen will do it for you. And that makes it a little bit easier for them to understand because really the only place they have to go is sideways. And as soon as you get a little sideways step, I would give them a break and a pat and then keep asking until they start to figure out that you want them to go sideways. And once they have grasped the concept facing the pen, then you can start to move it out into the open. So I think here I was trying to get Ripley to follow me. Now as you can see, she was sort of like, I don't understand. So now I shifted back to asking her to just move her haunches. And she thinks that I want her to go forward, so I'll keep stepping back to catch her shoulders. And as soon as she gives me the littlest step, I'll reward her. And you can hear me clucking quite a bit, which honestly isn't the best thing, because it sort of takes away the meaning of the click. When you click, you want there to be an immediate reaction. And when you just... the meaning of the click gets muddled, because it doesn't actually mean anything anymore, because you've been doing it so much. without a reaction. Ideally, you'll have a measured and consistent increasing of your aids until you get a reaction. And obviously, once you get a reaction, then you'll cease the aid, with the goal being the smallest aid gets a reaction. You can see I stuck my arm out a little bit in front of Ripley's nose to try to stop the forward motion. And you can see she's rather clever for having figured out a little bit of a sideways motion was what I was aiming for. And you can see we've gone back to asking her to yield her shoulders. And I crossed my legs too, and that was a really good step. So I'll give her a break for a second. And now I'm going to ask her to move forward. And she moves her haunches because I have been asking her to move her haunches. So she is a very clever little animal and tries to do what she thinks is the right thing. So we practiced yielding our haunches and shoulders for a couple more minutes. And now I'm going to finish off by just picking up all of her feet one more time. So again, I start on the front and move to the hind leg, and then I do the same thing on the other side.
Good girl.
And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please drop them in the comment box below, and remember to like and subscribe. Thank you.